Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What If. So in this video, we will see what if Ben 10 met his evil counterpart. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Mirror Cracks. Ben Tennyson slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix, emerald light flashing across his face as his body morphed and expanded. Muscles grew and hardened into crystalline formations, his entire being transforming into the towering form of Diamond Head. "Let's see how you like this," Ben shouted, his crystalline arms extending forward as he fired a barrage of shards toward the reptilian alien tearing through downtown Bellwood. The creature, 8 feet tall with scales like volcanic rock and eyes that burned like magma, merely snarled and batted the crystals away. "Dude, I'm starting to think this guy isn't in the mood to talk," Kevin Levin called from across the street, his hand absorbed into the metal of a nearby fire hydrant, transforming his arm into a massive hammer. He charged forward, swinging with enough force to shatter concrete. The alien caught Kevin's arm mid-swing. "Primitive," it hissed through needle-like teeth before tossing Kevin through the air like a ragdoll. Gwen's pink mana shields materialized just in time, catching Kevin before he crashed into the storefront behind them. "These energy readings are off the charts," she called, her eyes glowing with magical energy as she analyzed their opponent. "This isn't just another escapee from the null void, Ben." Ben rolled his crystalline shoulders. "Yeah, kinda figured that out." He charged forward, morphing his arms into razor-sharp blades. The alien met his attack with startling speed, its claws leaving scorch marks across Ben's diamond body. "Whoa! Hot hands!" The fight spilled across Main Street, civilians scattering as cars were tossed aside. The alien seemed to be searching for something, its head swiveling between attacks as though tracking an invisible signal. "Ben!" Gwen shouted, hurling bolts of mana that exploded against the creature's scaled hide. "It's not trying to fight us, it's looking for something." Ben skidded backward from a particularly powerful blow. "Yeah, well, it's doing a pretty good job multitasking then." He slammed his fists into the ground, creating a wave of diamond spikes that raced toward the alien. The creature leaped impossibly high, avoiding the attack entirely. As it reached the apex of its jump, a strange device on its wrist began pulsing with red light. The air behind it seemed to tear open, reality splitting to reveal a swirling vortex of energy. "Oh no you don't!" Ben shouted, launching himself into the air and tackling the creature just as it was about to enter the portal. They tumbled through together, the rift closing behind them. "Ben!" Gwen and Kevin's voices echoed behind him, but then everything went silent. Ben and the alien creature crashed through a kaleidoscope of colors and fragmented realities. The journey lasted only seconds before they slammed onto hard ground, concrete, by the feel of it. Ben rolled to his feet, diamond fists at the ready. But they weren't alone. "About time you showed up," came a voice that sent chills down Ben's crystalline spine, because it was his own voice. Standing 20 feet away was, himself. But not quite. This Ben wore a black and red jacket rather than his familiar green, and his eyes held a coldness that felt fundamentally wrong. The Omnitrix on his wrist glowed crimson instead of emerald. "What the—" Ben started, but the alien creature he'd followed through the portal was already kneeling before this other Ben. "The target was located as commanded, Master Tennyson," it growled. But this one interfered. The other Ben's lips curled into a smile that looked all wrong on Ben's own face. "That's fine, Vulcanus. You've done well." He stepped forward, eyes studying Ben with calculated interest. "So this universe's version of me uses Heterosapiens. Interesting choice. I would have gone with something with a bit more firepower." The Omnitrix timed out in a flash of green light, and Ben returned to human form, squaring his shoulders as he faced his doppelganger. "Who are you supposed to be? Some kind of albedo 2.0? The other Ben laughed. "Not even close. I'm you, Ben Tennyson. Just, A more ambitious version. He raised his wrist, showcasing the red glowing Omnitrix. Where I come from, I didn't waste the most powerful weapon in the universe playing hero. Where exactly is, where you come from? Ben demanded, finger hovering near his own Omnitrix, ready to transform again at the first sign of trouble. Another reality. One where I made smarter choices. The other Ben gestured around them, and Ben realized they were standing in some kind of abandoned warehouse, the walls lined with technology that definitely wasn't from Earth. You can call me Inverse Ben if it makes things simpler for your heroic brain. Ben narrowed his eyes, taking a careful step to the side to get a better view of the equipment. What's with the dimensional portal jumping? Bored in your own universe? Hardly. I've simply outgrown it. Inverse Ben walked toward a central console pulsing with energy. I've conquered most of my Earth, subjugated the alien races that once thought themselves superior to humans. But I've hit a ceiling. His eyes gleamed. So I started looking, sideways. Ben's Omnitrix had recharged, the familiar green glow returning. And what? You thought you'd pop over and do the same here? Hate to break it to you, but this Earth's already got a Ben Tennyson, and he's not the conquering type. Inverse Ben's smile widened. That's precisely why I'm here. He nodded to Vulcanus, who pressed a sequence on a nearby panel. The warehouse walls suddenly became transparent, revealing they were in the middle of Bellwood, but not Ben's Bellwood. The skyline was different, dominated by massive black towers. Alien technology integrated with human architecture. And everywhere, screens displayed Inverse Ben's face. Welcome to my world, Ben. Inverse Ben spread his arms. Efficient. Orderly. Advanced beyond anything your reality has achieved. And this, he gestured to the equipment around them, is my latest project. A way to bridge dimensions permanently. Ben's stomach twisted. You're trying to invade my dimension. Invade? Such a primitive term. Inverse Ben shook his head. I'm offering an upgrade. Your world is chaotic, constantly under threat. I've seen it. But there's a better way. His expression hardened. Unfortunately, you're the primary obstacle. Ben activated the Omnitrix, cycling through his aliens. Yeah, I get that a lot. I expected resistance. Inverse Ben's own Omnitrix glowed red as he activated it. But I also know exactly how to beat you, because I know exactly how you think. In a flash of crimson light, he transformed into a form Ben recognized all too well, Heat Blast, but with inverted colors, flames burning blue-black instead of orange. Ben slammed down on his own Omnitrix. Let's test that theory. Light enveloped him, and he transformed into XLR-8, the speedster alien perfect for the confined space of the warehouse. Because I'm betting I've got a few surprises for you. He blurred into motion, circling Inverse Heat Blast at supersonic speed. The floor began to heat beneath him as his counterpart raised his hands, sending torrents of dark fire in all directions. Predictable. Inverse Heat Blast called out. You always go for speed when you're in an unfamiliar situation. You're reading from a playbook I wrote. The heat intensified, the warehouse floor glowing red-hot. Ben changed tactics, darting in close to deliver a rapid series of strikes before retreating. Inverse Heat Blast staggered but recovered quickly. Vulcanus. Initiate the tracker. Inverse Ben shouted. The alien creature activated something on the central console. The air began to shimmer with energy, and Ben felt the Omnitrix on his wrist pulse strangely. What did you do? Ben demanded, skidding to a halt. Inverse Heat Blast grinned, flames curling around his face. Just making sure I can find my way to your world again. Your Omnitrix's quantum signature is quite distinctive. Ben rushed forward again, but this time Inverse Heat Blast was ready. He created a superheated air current that caught XLR-8 and sent him spinning into a wall of equipment. Something exploded on impact, and alarms began blaring throughout the warehouse. Inverse Ben reverted to human form, checking a device on his wrist. Perfect. Connection established. He glanced at Ben, who was struggling to his feet. I'd love to continue this family reunion, but I've got interdimensional business to attend to. Ben transformed back to human form, the Omnitrix needing to recharge. You're not going anywhere. Actually, Inverse Ben replied calmly, we both are. He pressed a button on his wrist device, and the air behind Ben tore open, revealing another swirling portal. Before Ben could react, Vulcanus charged from behind, slamming into him and sending them both hurtling through the rift. See you soon, hero. Inverse Ben's voice echoed as the portal collapsed behind them. Ben and Vulcanus tumbled through the dimensional gateway, emerging with bone-jarring force onto familiar streets, his Bellwood. They crashed into a parked car, setting off its alarm. Ben rolled away, disoriented but alive. Vulcanus recovered first, rising to his full height with a growl. The master wants you eliminated, he snarled, advancing on Ben. Yeah, well, your master isn't here right now, Ben replied, checking his Omnitrix, still recharging. And I've got friends. On cue, a blast of mana struck Vulcanus from behind, staggering the alien. Gwen rushed into view, hands glowing with energy. Ben! Where did you go? You vanished for almost an hour. Kevin wasn't far behind, his body covered in concrete armor. Dude, you scared the hell out of us. And I see you brought a friend back. Vulcanus roared and charged toward them, but now it was 3 against 1. Even without the Omnitrix, Ben knew how to handle himself. He ducked under Vulcanus's swing, using the alien's momentum to help Kevin flip it onto its back. We need to contain him. Ben shouted. He works for, Vulcanus's wrist device activated again, creating another portal beneath him. Before they could react, the alien sank through the dimensional tear, which sealed shut immediately after. My evil twin from another dimension, Ben finished lamely, staring at the empty space where Vulcanus had been. Kevin and Gwen exchanged looks. I'm sorry, you're what now? Kevin asked, armor receding from his skin. Ben ran a hand through his hair, the events of the past hour crashing down on him. You're not going to believe this, but I just met another version of me from a parallel Earth, and he's basically conquered his world. Gwen crossed her arms. And let me guess, he's got his sights set on ours next. Got it in one, Ben confirmed. And the worst part? He knows exactly how I think, how I fight. He's me, but without any of the moral restraints. Kevin snorted. Great. As if one Tennyson wasn't enough trouble. We need to get to Plumber HQ, Ben said, checking his Omnitrix, almost recharged. If what I saw is any indication, we don't have much time before he makes his next move. Plumber headquarters buzzed with activity as Magister Max Tennyson studied the dimensional readings on the central monitor. His weathered face looked more lined than usual under the harsh light. The energy signature matches nothing in our database, he said, turning to face Ben, Gwen, and Kevin. But the quantum displacement is unmistakable. Something, or someone, punched through from another reality. Inverse Ben, Ben said, leaning against a console. That's what he called himself. Same powers as me, same face, but with a serious superiority complex. Rook Blanco, Ben's partner, entered the command center carrying a tablet. I have analyzed the residual energy from the dimensional breach. It is consistent with theoretical models of parallel universe intersection. In English, Rook? Kevin asked. He is saying that Ben's evil doppelganger is definitely from another dimension, Gwen translated. And based on these readings, the membrane between our realities is getting thinner. Max nodded grimly. If these breaches continue, we could be looking at full-scale dimensional instability. Ben pushed off from the console, pacing. You didn't see his world. Everything was wrong. He's turned Earth into some kind of dictatorship with himself at the top. And now he wants to do the same thing here. But why? Rook asked. What purpose would controlling multiple dimensions serve? Power, Ben replied simply. The guy's basically me if I decided to use the Omnitrix to rule instead of protect. And the scary part is, it seemed like he was good at it. The central alarm suddenly blared to life, red warning lights flashing throughout the base. A holographic map of Bellwood appeared in the center of the room, multiple points glowing bright red. Energy spikes all over the city, Max announced, fingers flying over the controls. Same signature as before. He's back, Ben said, already moving toward the exit. And I'm betting he didn't come alone. Gwen grabbed his arm. Ben, wait. You said yourself he knows how you think, how you fight. We need a plan. I am the plan, Ben replied, activating the Omnitrix. You guys focus on containing whatever comes through those portals. I'll find Inverse Ben. Kevin stepped forward. No way, man. We stick together on this one. Kevin's right, Max said firmly. This isn't just another alien threat. If what you're saying is true, this version of you has all your powers and none of your restraint. That makes him potentially the most dangerous enemy we've ever faced. Ben hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But we need to move fast. Split into teams. Agreed, Max said. Rook, you and Ben take downtown. Gwen and Kevin, head to the industrial district. I'll coordinate from here and dispatch other plumbers to the remaining hotspots. Ben transformed into Jetray, his manta ray form perfect for rapid aerial deployment. Let's go, he called to Rook, who was already racing toward the hangar bay where his proto-TRUK was parked. As they sped toward downtown Bellwood, Ben couldn't shake the unsettling feeling of facing off against himself. Not a clone, not an imposter, but a version of him that had taken a different path. One who had looked at the same crossroads and chosen conquest over heroism. Ben, Rook's voice came through the communicator, interrupting his thoughts. I am detecting a massive energy surge 2 blocks ahead. Something is coming through. Ben banked sharply, his jet ray form cutting through the air above Main Street. Below, civilians scattered as the air itself seemed to tear open, a jagged red portal materializing in the middle of the road. And stepping through it, no way, Ben muttered, coming to a hover. It was Vilgax, but not quite the Vilgax he knew. This version wore armor with red pulsing circuitry and carried a sword that crackled with dimensional energy. Behind him came Dr. Onimo, Zomboso, and several other villains from Ben's rogue gallery, each sporting modifications and technology beyond their usual capabilities. People of this earth. Vilgax's voice boomed across the street. Your reality now belongs to Lord Tennyson. Surrender and you will be permitted to serve in the new order. Ben swooped down, landing on a lamppost above the assembled villains. Sorry, Vilgax, or whatever version of Vilgax you're supposed to be, but the only Tennyson running things around here is me. And I'm more of a save the world than rule the world kind of guy. Vilgax looked up, his red eyes narrowing. Ah, the hero version. Lord Tennyson warned us about you. He raised his sword. He also promised substantial rewards for whoever brings you to him, alive or otherwise. Ben transformed in mid-air, shifting from Jetray to Humungosaur, his massive dinosaur-like form crashing down onto the street with enough force to create a small crater. Then come and get me. The villains attacked en masse, their coordination suggesting they'd worked together before. Dr. Onimo unleashed mutated creatures that seemed partly mechanical, while Zomboso released hypnotic gas that swirled in unnatural patterns. Rook arrived in the proto-TRUK, transforming it into battle mode as he provided covering fire. Ben, he called. These are not the same villains we know. Their technology is far more advanced. Tell me about it. Ben grunted, grappling with Vilgax, who matched Humungosaur's strength with unnerving ease. I'm guessing Inverse Ben gave them an upgrade. The fight spilled across downtown, buildings sustaining damage as Ben was forced on the defensive. These weren't just stronger versions of familiar enemies, they fought with strategies specifically designed to counter his usual tactics. They know my moves, Ben realized, switching to 4 arms to better handle multiple opponents at once. Inverse Ben trained them. Rook bounded off his vehicle, his proto-tool transforming into a staff as he engaged Zomboso. If they know your standard approaches, perhaps it is time for something less standard. Ben grinned beneath 4 arms' face. Rook, you're a genius. He slapped the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, transforming again, this time into goop, his amorphous form flowing between the attackers like quicksilver. What is this? Vilgax snarled, his sword passing harmlessly through Ben's fluid body. Just a little improv. Ben replied, encircling Vilgax's legs and hardening, tripping the warlord. Something tells me Inverse Ben doesn't get creative very often. Across town, Gwen and Kevin were facing their own dimensional invaders. A version of Charmcaster led a group of stone creatures through the industrial district, systematically securing key infrastructure. The Master requires this world's power grid, she announced, her magic darker and more corrupt than the Charmcaster Gwen knew. Resistance is pointless, your reality has already been mapped for conquest. Gwen's hands glowed with mana as she created a barrier between Charmcaster's forces and the power substation they were approaching. Sorry, but this reality is under protection. Kevin absorbed the metal from a nearby electrical tower, his body transforming into living steel. Yeah, and the protection's got a bad attitude. The battle was fierce, magical energy crackling against Gwen's shields as Kevin engaged the stone creatures in close combat. But something wasn't right, the attackers seemed more focused on setting up strange devices around the substation than on winning the fight. Kevin! Gwen called. Deflecting a blast from Charmcaster. They're planting something. Kevin smashed through 2 stone guardians, making his way to one of the devices. Some kind of tech, he reported, examining it without touching. Looks like it's designed to, his eyes widened. Gwen, these are dimensional anchors. They're trying to create stable bridges between realities. Charmcaster laughed, the sound distorted and wrong. Clever boy. Lord Tennyson requires stable pathways for his armies. This is merely the first wave. First wave? Gwen repeated, a chill running down her spine. Back downtown, Ben was holding his own against the dimensional invaders, his unpredictable transformations throwing off their carefully prepared strategies. He switched from goop to swampfire, unleashing a barrage of fireballs that forced the villains to scatter. Rook, he called. We need to contain these guys before they can do whatever they came here for. Rook nodded, activating his communicator. Magister Tennyson, we require containment units at our location immediately. Already on their way, Max's voice crackled through. But we've got bigger problems. Reports of dimensional breaches all over the planet, London, Tokyo, Cairo. This isn't just about Bellwood anymore. Ben felt a chill despite Swampfire's natural heat. This was coordinated, strategic. Inverse Ben wasn't just making a statement, he was executing a carefully planned invasion. The ground beneath them suddenly trembled. The air in the center of the battlefield shimmered, energy coalescing into another portal, larger than the others, its edges more stable. Ben braced himself for whatever might emerge, but instead, the villains began retreating toward it. The Master calls us back, Vilgax announced, backing toward the portal. Our work here is done for now. Oh no you don't. Ben charged forward, but a blast of energy from the portal itself knocked him backward. When he recovered, the villains were gone, and the portal was shrinking. Rook helped Ben to his feet as he reverted to human form. They escaped. Yeah, but why? Ben wondered, staring at the spot where the portal had been. They had us outnumbered. Why pull back? The answer came when Gwen's voice broke through on their communicators, urgent and afraid. Ben. They've planted some kind of dimensional technology throughout the city. We managed to disable one, but there are dozens more. Kevin's voice joined in. They're creating a network, man. Some kind of infrastructure to make the portals permanent. Ben's blood ran cold. He's not just sending raiding parties. He's preparing for a full-scale invasion. Plumber containment teams arrived, securing the area as Ben, Rook, Gwen, and Kevin reconvened at headquarters. The central command room had transformed into a crisis center, with holographic displays showing dimensional breach points across the globe. It's worse than we thought, Max said grimly as they entered. These devices are quantum-linked. Each one strengthens the others in a geometric progression. If they all activate simultaneously, the walls between dimensions collapse, Gwen finished, studying the data. Our reality could be permanently merged with his. Ben paced the floor, frustrated. This is my fault. I should have stopped him when I had the chance. You couldn't have known what he was planning, Max reassured him. But I should have. Ben insisted. He's me. I should have anticipated this. Kevin leaned against a console. That's the problem, isn't it? He knows exactly what you do because he would have done the same thing in your place, until he didn't. The thought hung in the air. What exactly had caused Inverse Ben to take such a different path? Rook cleared his throat. Perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly. If Inverse Ben truly is Ben from another reality, then understanding what caused their divergence might help us predict his next move. Ben stopped pacing. You're right. When I was in his reality, he mentioned something about making smarter choices. What if something happened to him that didn't happen to me? Or vice versa, Gwen added thoughtfully. A key moment where your paths diverged. The central alarm blared again, cutting off their discussion. A new holographic display appeared, showing a dimensional breach forming directly above Plumber headquarters. Everyone to battle stations. Max ordered. Full lockdown protocols. The base's defenses activated automatically, energy shields covering every entrance. But the portal forming above them wasn't trying to break in, instead, a single figure emerged, hovering in midair. On the monitors, they could see Inverse Ben clearly now. He wore a sleek black and red exosuit, his omnitrix glowing ominously on his wrist. He made no aggressive move, simply hovering there, apparently waiting. He wants to talk, Ben realized. Open communications. Max hesitated, then nodded to a technician. The main screen flickered, and Inverse Ben's face appeared, smiling that same wrong smile. Hello, Ben, he said casually. Enjoying the gifts I sent? Just a small sample of what I can offer your world. Ben stepped forward. What do you want? Direct as always. Inverse Ben chuckled. What I want is simple, cooperation. My reality has advanced technology, order, security. Yours has, well, let's call them resources, I could use. You mean people to subjugate, Ben shot back. Inverse Ben sighed. Such a limited perspective. I'm offering an exchange that benefits both worlds. By force? If necessary. Inverse Ben's expression hardened. But I'd prefer to have you on my side. After all, who better to help me reshape this world than its greatest hero? The offer hung in the air, shocking in its audacity. Ben felt everyone's eyes on him. You can't be serious, he finally said. Completely serious. Inverse Ben leaned closer to the camera. Think about it, Ben. How many times have you saved this world, only for the same threats to return? How many times have you watched people suffer because you refuse to take the necessary steps to create lasting peace? That's not what? Not your responsibility. But it could be. Inverse Ben's voice softened. I know you, Ben. Better than anyone else possibly could. I know the frustration you feel when bureaucracy gets in the way of doing what's right. I know how you've wondered what would happen if you just took charge. Ben fell silent, because the words hit uncomfortably close to home. There had been moments, brief, fleeting moments, when he'd had exactly those thoughts. You're wondering how our paths diverged, aren't you? In verse Ben continued, reading Ben's expression perfectly. What made you a hero and me a villain in your eyes? The thought crossed my mind, Ben admitted. In verse Ben nodded. I'll show you. He raised his hand, and the portal behind him expanded slightly. Come alone. I give you my word you won't be harmed. If you want to understand, truly understand, this is your only chance. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. You can't seriously be considering this, Kevin said immediately. It's obviously a trap, Gwen agreed. Rook studied Ben's face. But you are going to accept, aren't you? Ben nodded slowly. I have to. He's right about one thing, I need to understand what we're dealing with. And I'm the only one who can get close enough to find out what he's really planning. Max stepped forward. Ben, this is too dangerous. He could be leading you anywhere. I know the risks, Grandpa, Ben said, determination settling over his features. But think about it, he didn't have to announce himself. He didn't have to offer to show me anything. He wants me to understand his perspective, which means he thinks he can convince me. Or eliminate you where we can't help, Kevin pointed out. Ben shook his head. He doesn't want to eliminate me. If he did, he would have tried harder during our first fight. He tapped his Omnitrix. Besides, I've got this, and I'm not exactly easy to take down. The debate continued for several minutes, but Ben's mind was made up. Finally, reluctantly, Max agreed, with conditions. We'll outfit you with quantum trackers, he said. At the first sign of trouble, you activate your emergency beacon, and we'll find a way to reach you, dimensional barriers or not. Ben nodded, submitting to the plumber's preparations. As Rook helped attach the tracking devices to his jacket and Omnitrix, he pulled Ben aside. There is something else to consider, Rook said quietly. If he truly is you from another reality, then he will anticipate your usual strategies. You must be prepared to act in ways that are, un-Ben-like. Ben grinned. Don't worry, Rook. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that even I wouldn't expect. Within 20 minutes, Ben stood on the roof of Plumber headquarters, facing the swirling portal that Inverse Ben had left open. Gwen, Kevin, Rook, and Max watched from a safe distance, monitors tracking Ben's vital signs and the Omnitrix's energy levels. Remember the plan, Max said over the communicator. Reconnaissance only. Find out what he's after, then get out. And if he tries anything, Kevin added, kick his alternate reality butt. Ben took a deep breath and stepped toward the portal. Here goes nothing, he muttered, and walked through. The journey was smoother this time, less disorienting. Ben emerged onto what appeared to be an observation platform high above a city, Inverse Ben's version of Bellwood. In daylight, the differences were even more stark. Advanced transportation systems wove between sleek buildings. Alien technology integrated seamlessly with human architecture. And everywhere, screens displayed Inverse Ben's face or symbol. Impressive, isn't it? Inverse Ben stood at the edge of the platform, looking out over his domain. He'd removed his exosuit, now dressed in civilian clothes that mirrored Ben's own but with his signature black and red color scheme. From crime-ridden backwater to the most advanced city on Earth in less than 5 years. Ben approached cautiously, taking in the view. At what cost? Less than you might think. Inverse Ben turned to face him. You're expecting to see suffering, oppression. But look closer. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing scenes from around the city. People going about their daily lives, children playing in parks, hospitals with technology far beyond anything in Ben's world. My methods may be different from yours, but my goal has always been the same, Inverse Ben said quietly. To protect humanity and help it reach its potential. Ben frowned. By appointing yourself dictator. By conquering other dimensions. By taking responsibility. Inverse Ben's voice sharpened. Something you've never been willing to do. That's not true, Ben shot back. I've been saving the world since I was 10 years old. Saving it? Or just delaying its inevitable collapse? Inverse Ben shook his head. You put out fires, Ben. I prevent them from starting in the first place. He pressed a button on his wrist, and the platform began to descend, becoming a high-speed elevator that carried them down into the city. You wanted to know where our paths diverged. I'm going to show you. The elevator came to a stop in what appeared to be a memorial garden. Beautiful alien plants surrounded a central structure, a statue depicting Max Tennyson, heroic and larger than life. Ben's breath caught. Grandpa. Inverse Ben walked toward the statue, his expression solemn. In your reality, did Grandpa Max survive the hybrid invasion? The question hit Ben like a physical blow. Yes. We stopped it together. Inverse Ben nodded slowly. That's where everything changed. In my world, he didn't. He sacrificed himself to save me, Gwen, and Kevin. His voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed old pain. His last words to me were to do whatever it takes to protect Earth. Ben stared at the statue, trying to imagine a world without his grandfather's guidance, his wisdom, his restraining influence. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. Don't be. His death had purpose. Inverse Ben's expression hardened. It showed me that playing by the rules, being reactive instead of proactive, would never be enough. The threats we face are too great, the stakes too high for half measures. They walked through the garden in silence, passing other memorials, some to people Ben recognized, others he didn't. Finally, they reached a building that Ben immediately identified as their old high school, though completely modernized. After Grandpa died, I made different choices, Inverse Ben continued. When the plumbers tried to restrict my activities, I took control of the organization instead of working within it. When Earth governments proved too slow to adapt to alien threats, I established a more efficient system. You mean you took over, Ben translated. I unified, Inverse Ben corrected. And the results speak for themselves. No more alien invasions. No more terrorist organizations. Crime reduced by 94%. Medical advancements that have saved millions of lives. They entered the school, walking through hallways filled with students. Ben was struck by how normal everything seemed, until he noticed subtle differences. The curriculum displayed on wall screens included advanced physics, alien languages, and dimensional theory alongside regular subjects. Security drones patrolled discreetly. And every student wore a small device on their wrist, not Omnitrix's, but clearly related technology. Individual monitoring, Inverse Ben explained, noticing Ben's gaze. Health tracking, educational support, emergency response. We can detect if a student is being bullied or falling behind and intervene immediately. Surveillance, you mean, Ben muttered. Protection, Inverse Ben insisted. The same protection I offer to everyone. They continued through the city, Inverse Ben showcasing achievement after achievement. Hospitals where previously incurable diseases were routinely treated. Research facilities developing technologies decades beyond what existed in Ben's world. Clean energy systems that had eliminated pollution entirely. Despite his misgivings, Ben couldn't deny the results were impressive. But something felt fundamentally wrong about the perfect order of it all, the lack of chaos that made human life, human. And now you want to bring all this to my world, Ben said as they returned to the observation platform. Whether we want it or not. Inverse Ben shrugged. Your world is already accepting it. Those dimensional anchors my agents placed. They're not weapons, they're technological gateways. Already, information is flowing through them, upgrading your internet, your medical databases, your scientific knowledge. Ben's eyes widened. You're hacking our world. I'm improving it. Inverse Ben countered. And soon, the citizens of your Earth will see the benefits and welcome more direct intervention. And if they don't? Inverse Ben's expression darkened slightly. History shows that progress is rarely embraced immediately. Sometimes people need to be guided toward better choices. Forced, you mean? Ben's hand hovered near his omnitrix. If necessary. Inverse Ben stepped closer. But it doesn't have to be that way, Ben. That's why I brought you here, to show you what we could accomplish together. With your influence in your reality and my resources, the transition could be seamless. Ben shook his head. You still don't get it. What you've built here, it's impressive, sure. But it's not freedom. People need to make their own choices, their own mistakes. Even when those mistakes cost lives. 'Cause suffering? Inverse Ben challenged. How many people have died because you respected their freedom to make bad decisions? The question hit harder than Ben expected, touching on doubts he'd carried for years. How many threats could have been prevented if he'd taken a more proactive approach? How many villains would never have emerged if he'd dealt more permanently with threats the first time? I've wondered the same things, Ben admitted quietly. But there's a line. The moment I decide I know better than everyone else, the moment I take away people's right to choose, I become no better than the villains I've fought. Inverse Ben's expression softened unexpectedly. I knew you'd say that. It's what I would have said, once. He turned away, looking out over his city. Before I learned that sometimes the greatest kindness is making difficult choices for those who can't see the bigger picture. And what about my choice? Ben asked. You've shown me your world, made your case. What if I still say no? Inverse Ben didn't turn around. Then we return to our original plan. My agents continue placing dimensional anchors throughout your world. The network grows stronger. And eventually, the boundaries between our realities become so thin that merger is inevitable. We'll stop you, Ben said firmly. Now Inverse Ben turned, smiling faintly. You'll try. But unlike other enemies you've faced, I know exactly what you'll do before you do it. I've calculated every possible move, every transformation, every strategy. Not every move, Ben replied, activating his omnitrix. But instead of transforming, he pressed a specific sequence, the emergency recall signal the plumbers had prepared. Inverse Ben's eyes widened in genuine surprise. What did you just do? The air around Ben began to shimmer with energy, not from Inverse Ben's technology but from his own reality reaching through. Something you wouldn't have thought of, Ben said, stepping back as a portal began to form behind him, a plumber extraction point. I asked for help. Inverse Ben's shock quickly transformed into anger. You fool. You think this changes anything? He activated his own omnitrix, transforming into a red and black version of Heat Blast. All you've done is accelerate my timetable. He launched a stream of dark fire at Ben, who dove through the forming portal, the heat searing his back as he tumbled through. Behind him, he heard Inverse Ben's voice, distorted by dimensional energy, run back to your reality, hero. When I return, it will be with an army. Ben crashed onto the floor of plumber headquarters, the portal snapping shut behind him. Gwen, Kevin, Rook, and Max rushed forward, helping him to his feet. Ben. Are you alright? Gwen asked, checking him for injuries. I'm fine, he assured them, brushing off his jacket. But we've got big problems. Those devices they planted around the world, they're not just invasion points. They're information gateways, feeding our technology, upgrading it with their knowledge. Why would he want to improve our tech? Kevin asked, confused. Because he's playing the long game, Ben realized, the pieces falling into place. He doesn't just want to conquer by force, he wants to make our world dependent on his technology, his improvements, until we welcome him with open arms. Max's expression grew grave. And if that doesn't work? Then he invades the old-fashioned way, Ben confirmed. He's already gathering an army, enhanced versions of every villain we've ever faced, all trained specifically to counter my usual tactics. Rook frowned. If he knows your strategies so intimately, our conventional defense plans may be ineffective. That's why we need unconventional plans, Ben said, determination hardening his voice. He thinks he knows exactly what I'll do because he would make the same choices. But there's one big difference between us. What's that? Gwen asked. Ben smiled grimly. I'm not alone. I never have been. He looked around at his team, his family. And that's something he'll never understand, no matter how smart he thinks he is. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the base. On the central monitor, new dimensional breaches appeared, dozens of them, forming all over Bellwood. He's not waiting, Ben realized, rushing toward the exit. Inverse Ben is making his move now. As they raced to deploy, Ben couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that this was just the beginning. Inverse Ben had shown him a glimpse of what could have been, a world where power trumped freedom, where order replaced chaos, where Ben Tennyson had become the very thing he had always fought against. And deep down, in a place he rarely acknowledged, Ben understood how easily their paths could have diverged. The battle for Bellwood, for Earth, was about to begin in earnest. But this wasn't just a fight against another invasion. This was a fight against a dark reflection of himself, a version of Ben Tennyson who had looked at the same universe and drawn fundamentally different conclusions about his responsibility to it. As Ben transformed into Big Chill, taking to the skies above Plumber headquarters to survey the emerging portals, one thought crystallized in his mind: Inverse Ben had to be stopped, not just to save this world, but to preserve the very meaning of what it meant to be a hero. Chapter 2, Gathering Storms. Ben skidded around the corner, the Omnitrix already cycling through his alien roster as three crystalline monsters crashed through a department store window behind him. Sharp, jagged limbs scraped against concrete as they pursued, their bodies pulsing with the same red energy that characterized everything from Inverse Ben's dimension. Any day now would be great. Kevin shouted, his body coated in steel as he grappled with a fourth creature, barely keeping its razor-sharp claws from his face. Ben slammed down on the Omnitrix. Going hero. Emerald light flashed, and in Ben's place stood Diamond Head, crystalline body glinting in the afternoon sun. Let's see how you like fighting your own kind. He charged forward, morphing his arms into blades that clashed against the creature's limbs with a sound like shattering glass. Each impact sent shock waves through his crystalline form, but Ben pushed forward, using his ability to control his crystal composition to harden strategically against their attacks. Gwen. How we looking on containment? Ben called out, voice echoing through his mineral form. Across the street, Gwen's hands glowed with pink mana as she maintained a massive energy dome around another group of interdimensional invaders, these resembling what might happen if someone crossed Volpomancers with industrial machinery. Not great. These things adapt to magical restraints faster than I can reinforce them. It had been like this for 3 days straight since Inverse Ben's initial attack. Dimensional breaches opening across Bellwood, across the world, disgorging creatures, technology, and occasionally familiar villains with unfamiliar upgrades. The plumbers were stretched thin, local authorities overwhelmed, and Team Tennyson running on fumes and energy drinks. Ben shattered one creature with a well-placed uppercut, only to watch in dismay as the fragments began reassembling behind him. They're getting smarter. No kidding. Kevin replied, finally gaining the upper hand against his opponent by absorbing the properties of a nearby fire hydrant and dousing the creature with pressurized water, which seemed to temporarily disrupt its structural integrity. And there's no end to them. Ben's communicator crackled to life. Ben. Report status. Grandpa Max's voice, strained from days without sleep but still commanding. 5 more of those crystal things downtown. Ben replied, ducking under a swipe that would have taken his head off. We've got them contained for now, but they keep regenerating. Understood. Rook's team has neutralized the breach in the financial district. He's headed your way for backup. Tell him to step on it. Ben transformed one arm into a massive hammer, smashing a creature into powder, only to watch it begin reforming again. These things don't know when to quit. A familiar engine roar announced Rook's arrival, the proto-TRUK screeching around the corner in battle mode. Energy weapons deployed from its roof, targeting the crystal creatures with precision fire. Ben! Rook called through the vehicle's external speakers. I have analyzed their reformation pattern. They require the energy signature from their dimensional origin to rebuild. Ben processed this information instantly. So we cut them off from their source. Rook's proto-tool transformed into a cannon-like configuration as he leapt from his vehicle. Precisely. These should help. He tossed small disc-shaped devices toward Ben, who caught them deftly. Dimensional dampeners. They create a localized field that blocks transdimensional energy. Ben didn't waste time with questions. He charged the nearest reforming creature, slapping a dampener onto its core. The effect was immediate, the red energy pulsing through its body flickered and died, its crystalline form collapsing into inert shards. Guys! Use these. Ben tossed dampeners to Gwen and Kevin, who quickly applied them to their own opponents with similar results. Within minutes, the street fell silent except for the distant wail of emergency vehicles and the crunch of crystal fragments under their feet. Ben reverted to human form, exhaustion etching his features. That's, what, the fifth attack today. Seventh, Rook corrected, retrieving and recycling the dampeners for reuse. And it is only 2 p.m. Gwen leaned against a lamppost, looking as tired as Ben felt. Her hair was disheveled, dark circles forming under her eyes. He's testing our defenses, figuring out our response patterns. You mean I'm testing our defenses, Ben said bitterly. Let's not forget, this is me we're fighting. Or what I could become. Kevin placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. Dude, that psycho with your face is not you. Not even close. Kevin is right, Rook agreed. While Inverse Ben may share your genetic makeup, his choices are his own. Ben wasn't so sure. His visit to the alternate reality had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. The way Inverse Ben had justified his actions, the genuine belief that he was doing the right thing, it all felt uncomfortably plausible. We need to get back to headquarters, Gwen interrupted his thoughts. Grandpa said Professor Paradox was finally responding to our emergency signals. Ben nodded, hope flickering. If anyone could help with a multidimensional crisis, it was the time-walking professor. Plumber headquarters had transformed into a war room. The central command center buzzed with activity as agents coordinated responses to incidents worldwide. Holographic displays showed hotspots across the globe where dimensional breaches had occurred, their frequency increasing hourly. Max Tennyson stood at the center of it all, directing operations with the efficiency of someone who had seen too many world-ending crises to be rattled by one more. He looked up as Ben and the team entered. Good timing, he said. Professor Paradox arrived 10 minutes ago. He's in the lab with Blukik and Dryba. Please tell me they've figured out how to shut down these breaches permanently, Ben said, following his grandfather through the bustling command center. Max's expression remained grim. Not exactly. But Paradox has information about what we're facing that you need to hear. The lab was in its usual state of organized chaos, with the addition of several dimensional monitoring devices jury-rigged together in configurations that probably violated multiple laws of physics. Professor Paradox stood examining one such contraption, his appearance unchanged as always, the same outfit, the same calm demeanor, the same ageless face. Ah, young Benjamin, he greeted cheerfully. Right on schedule, though I suppose that's to be expected when time is quite literally of the essence. Professor, Ben nodded, too exhausted for pleasantries. Please tell me you know how to stop Inverse Ben. Paradox's smile faded slightly. I'm afraid it's not quite that simple. You see, what your counterpart is attempting has never been done before, at least not successfully. Which is what, exactly? Gwen asked. Paradox gestured to a holographic display Blukik and Dryba had set up, showing multiple overlapping realities. He's attempting to merge select aspects of multiple dimensions into one reality, with himself as the controlling force, naturally. That's impossible, Kevin scoffed. Even I know different dimensions have different physical laws. Ordinarily, yes, Paradox agreed. But your doppelganger has discovered something rather ingenious, if troubling. He tapped his walking stick against the floor, and the hologram zoomed in on what looked like a massive technological structure. He's building a multiversal harmonic convergence engine. A multi-what now? Ben asked. Think of it as a tuning fork for reality, Paradox explained. It doesn't force dimensions to merge, it convinces them they were always meant to be merged. Quite elegant, in a potentially cosmos-destroying sort of way. Rook studied the hologram intently. And these dimensional anchors we have been encountering. Component pieces, Paradox confirmed. Each one creates a small area where the boundaries between dimensions become malleable. Once activated in sufficient numbers, they'll create a feedback loop that amplifies the engine's effects exponentially. Ben felt his stomach drop. So every attack, every breach, is providing cover for his agents to place more anchors, Max finished. We've recovered dozens, but there's no way to know how many we've missed. But that's not the worst part, Paradox continued, his normally cheerful demeanor completely serious now. The engine doesn't just merge physical realities. It merges timelines, histories, even consciousness itself. Those who resist the merge experience, well, let's just say the human mind wasn't designed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. The implications hit Ben like a physical blow. He's not just conquering our world. He's rewriting it so no one will even remember it being any other way. Precisely, Paradox nodded. Those with particularly strong wills or temporal awareness might maintain their original memories, but for most people, history will simply be whatever inverse Ben decides it should be. That's sick, Kevin muttered. That's efficient, Ben countered, thinking like his counterpart. No resistance if people don't know there's anything to resist against. Gwen looked at him with concern. Ben. He shook his head. Just trying to understand how he thinks. Ben turned back to Paradox. So how do we stop it? The engine requires 3 key components to function, Paradox explained, manipulating the hologram to highlight different sections of the machine. A quantum synchronizer to identify compatible dimensional frequencies, a reality anchor to stabilize the merged aspects, and a consciousness filter to reshape memory and perception. So we destroy these components before he can finish building the engine, Ben concluded. If only it were that simple, Paradox sighed. The components exist across different dimensional planes. Even I cannot access all of them directly due to the unique nature of the engine's design. Then we need to hit him at the source, Ben said, determination hardening his voice. Take the fight to him. That would be exceedingly dangerous, Paradox warned. His reality is tuned to his advantage. Your powers would be limited there, while his would be enhanced. Do we have a choice? Ben demanded. Before Paradox could answer, alarms blared throughout the base. The main screen shifted to show a new dimensional breach, the largest yet, forming directly above downtown Bellwood. It seems your counterpart is forcing your hand, Paradox observed. Ben was already moving toward the door. Let's go. The breach above downtown Bellwood wasn't like the others. It didn't appear as a tier or portal but as a slowly expanding sphere of crimson energy, pulsing like a heartbeat. Streets below had been evacuated, a perimeter established by plumber forces augmented by whatever Earth military units could be spared. Ben and the team arrived to find Magister Patelade coordinating the response. It's been growing steady for the past 20 minutes, the fish-like plumber reported. No incursions yet, but our sensors are picking up a massive buildup of dimensional energy. Ben studied the sphere, transforming into jet ray to get a better aerial view. He circled the phenomenon carefully, his natural energy sensitivity detecting subtle variations in the breach's output. "There's something different about this one," he called down to his team. "It's more stable, more deliberate." "Ben." Gwen's voice came urgently through his communicator. "I'm picking up a transmission coming through the breach. It's on all frequencies." As if on cue, the crimson sphere pulsed brighter, and an image began to form in the air beneath it, a massive holographic projection visible across the entire downtown area. Inverse Ben's face appeared, 40 feet tall and wearing an expression of calm authority. "People of Earth," he began, his voice echoing through the streets. "My name is Ben Tennyson, though not the Ben Tennyson you know." Ben landed beside his team, reverting to human form as they watched the transmission. "I come from a parallel Earth, one that has achieved peace, prosperity, and technological advancement beyond anything your world has experienced," Inverse Ben continued. "For the past several days, you've witnessed demonstrations of this technology, perhaps experienced them as attacks or invasions." "Demonstrations?" Kevin snarled. "People have died. I regret any suffering these necessary demonstrations have caused," Inverse Ben said, as if hearing Kevin's outburst. "But I needed to show you both the power at my disposal and the limitations of your current protectors." The hologram shifted to show footage of recent battles, Ben and his team struggling against the dimensional invaders, plumbers falling back from overwhelming forces, cities damaged in the conflicts. "Your Ben Tennyson is brave," the transmission continued as the image returned to Inverse Ben's face. "But he's fighting a losing battle against the inevitable. Evolution. Progress. The natural convergence of realities." Ben clenched his fists. "What's he playing at?" "I offer your world a choice," Inverse Ben announced. "Willing partnership in a new multiversal civilization, with all the benefits my reality can provide, medical technology that can cure any disease, energy systems that will end your dependence on fossil fuels, defense capabilities that will ensure lasting peace." The hologram changed again, showing images of his world, the advanced cities, the prosperity, the order Ben had witnessed firsthand. "Or," Inverse Ben's voice hardened, "continued resistance that can only end in your defeat and forced integration. The choice is yours." The image shifted one final time, showing a location Ben recognized immediately, the abandoned military base outside Bellwood where he'd first discovered the Omnitrix as a child. "To demonstrate my sincerity, I will arrive at these coordinates in exactly 6 hours, alone and unarmed, to meet with your world's leaders and discuss terms. I invite your Ben Tennyson to be present as well." Inverse Ben's expression softened slightly. "This doesn't have to be a conflict. It can be a reunion, a reconnection of paths that should never have diverged." The transmission ended, the hologram dissolving as the crimson sphere began to contract, eventually winking out of existence entirely. For a moment, silence reigned. Then everyone started speaking at once. "It's obviously a trap," Kevin insisted. "But one we cannot ignore," Rook countered. Gwen's expression was troubled. "He's trying to divide us. Turn public opinion against Ben by positioning himself as the reasonable one." Ben remained silent, processing what he'd just witnessed. This wasn't the approach he'd expected from Inverse Ben. A public appeal, an offer of peaceful integration, it was smarter, more subtle than a straight invasion. "He knows he can't just conquer us outright," Ben finally said. "He needs buy-in from at least some of Earth's population for his merge to work properly." "Buy-in he might get," Max said grimly as he approached, having just arrived from headquarters. "I've got reports from around the world. That transmission went everywhere, and people are already debating it. Some are terrified, but others—" He hesitated. "Others think he might have a point," Ben finished, not needing to hear the rest. "Especially after days of attacks that we haven't been able to stop completely. The White House is already calling an emergency session with the United Nations," Max confirmed. "They're discussing sending representatives to the meeting." Ben's jaw tightened. They can't seriously be considering his offer. Can you blame them? Gwen asked softly. He's offering solutions to problems we haven't solved: clean energy, advanced medicine, global security. For people who don't know what the cost would really be. The cost is everything. Ben snapped. Freedom, choice, our entire reality. He's not offering partnership, he's offering comfortable subjugation. We know that. Max placed a calming hand on Ben's shoulder. But the world leaders need to make their own decision. And they want you there when they do. Ben took a deep breath, forcing himself to think strategically. Fine. If Inverse Ben wants a meeting, he'll get one. But we're going to be ready for whatever he's really planning. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of preparation. While world leaders debated their approach to the unprecedented diplomatic situation, Team Tennyson focused on the practical reality: Inverse Ben wouldn't be coming alone, regardless of what he promised. The perimeter is secure, Rook reported, studying the tactical display in the mobile command center they'd established near the old military base. We have 3 layers of sensors that should detect any dimensional anomalies larger than 1 centimeter. What about smaller than that? Kevin asked, strapping energy weapons to his combat suit. Then we have bigger problems than we can handle, Gwen replied, her hands glowing as she reinforced the magical wards she'd placed around the meeting site. Ben paced the length of the command center, unable to shake his unease. It doesn't make sense. He has to know we wouldn't trust him to come alone. He has to know we'd prepare for a trap. Perhaps that is not his plan, Rook suggested. Perhaps he genuinely wishes to negotiate. No, Ben shook his head firmly. He's up to something else. Something we're not seeing. A knock at the door interrupted them. Max entered, now dressed in formal plumber attire for the diplomatic meeting. They're ready for you, Ben. The Secretary General and representatives from the Security Council have arrived. Ben nodded, taking a final look at his Omnitrix to ensure it was fully charged. Let's get this over with. The meeting site had been prepared in the center of the abandoned base, a large tent erected where the original Omnitrix pod had crashed so many years ago. Symbolic, Ben thought grimly. Inverse Ben was making a point about where their paths had begun. Inside the tent, a circular table had been arranged with representatives from major world powers and the United Nations seated around it. They fell silent as Ben entered with Max, all eyes turning to evaluate Earth's defender. Mr. Tennyson, the UN Secretary-General greeted with a nod. Thank you for joining us. I understand this situation must be uniquely difficult for you. You could say that, Ben replied, taking the empty seat reserved for him. But with all due respect, I need to make something clear before he arrives. Whatever he offers you, whatever promises he makes, he's lying. Murmurs rippled around the table. That's a strong accusation against someone you've barely met, the Chinese representative observed. I've met him, Ben countered. I've seen his world. What he calls peace and order, I call control and suppression. He doesn't want partners, he wants subjects. Yet the technological advancements he's offering could save countless lives, another diplomat argued. Medical breakthroughs alone would come with strings attached, Ben interrupted. Technology that he controls, that operates according to his rules. You'd be trading your independence for convenience. The American representative leaned forward. Mr. Tennyson, while we appreciate your concern, this is a diplomatic negotiation. We need to at least hear what's being offered before dismissing it outright. Ben opened his mouth to argue further but was cut off by a sudden shift in the air, a familiar distortion that preceded a dimensional breach. Unlike the violent tears they'd been dealing with for days, this one formed smoothly, a perfect circle of crimson energy that materialized in the empty space at the table. Inverse Ben stepped through, alone as promised, dressed not in battle gear but in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire, a suit styled similarly to Ben's jacket but in his signature black and red color scheme. The portal closed neatly behind him. Representatives of Earth, he greeted with a polite nod. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. His eyes found Ben's. And thank you, Ben, for being here. I know trust doesn't come easily between us. Save it, Ben replied coldly. We both know this is just another play. Inverse Ben smiled faintly before addressing the gathered diplomats. I understand your skepticism. In your position, I would feel the same. Which is why I've come prepared not just with words, but with proof of my intentions. He placed a small device on the table which projected a holographic display of Earth, but with glowing points of light scattered across its surface. These are the locations where dimensional anchors have been placed throughout your world, he explained. Not as invasion points, but as technological gateways. Each one is currently transmitting specialized knowledge to your infrastructure, medical data to hospitals, sustainable energy blueprints to power facilities, agricultural innovations to farming regions. The diplomats exchanged startled looks. We've been monitoring unusual data influxes, the Japanese representative confirmed hesitantly. Our research institutions have reported receiving advanced formulations they're still trying to understand. Gifts, Inverse Ben said simply. The first of many. No strings attached. He tapped the device, and the hologram shifted to show a complex molecular structure. This, for instance, is the cure for a form of cancer your scientists have been struggling with for decades. It's already being downloaded to research centers in 20 countries. Ben watched the faces around the table, saw the flicker of hope, of temptation. This was Inverse Ben's real weapon, not monsters or technology, but the promise of solutions to humanity's most pressing problems. And what do you want in return? Ben demanded, cutting through the growing atmosphere of possibility. Inverse Ben turned to him, expression open and reasonable. Cooperation. Access. The opportunity to establish formal dimensional gateways between our worlds, allowing for controlled exchange of people and knowledge. Leading to what end? Max asked, speaking up for the first time. Progress, Inverse Ben replied simply. The natural evolution of both our societies towards something greater than either could achieve alone. The Secretary-General studied him carefully. And if we decline? Then I respect your decision, Inverse Ben said, surprising everyone. The gifts I've already sent remain yours. The anchors currently in place would be deactivated, though not removed, should you change your minds in the future. You expect us to believe you'd just walk away? Ben asked incredulously. Inverse Ben's expression remained calm. I believe in self-determination, Ben. I may have taken a different path than you, but I still understand the importance of choice. He turned back to the diplomats. I don't seek to conquer your world. I seek to elevate it, with your permission. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, Inverse Ben answering questions with disarming honesty and clarity. He detailed the benefits his technology could bring, acknowledged concerns about sovereignty and independence, and repeatedly emphasized that any partnership would be governed by mutual agreements. Throughout it all, Ben remained silent, watching his counterpart work the room with a diplomatic skill he himself had never mastered. This wasn't the power-hungry tyrant he'd expected, or at least, he wasn't showing that face. This Inverse Ben was reasonable, thoughtful, and worst of all, convincing. I believe we have much to consider, the Secretary-General finally said. We would like time to discuss your proposals among ourselves and with our respective governments. Inverse Ben nodded graciously. Of course. Take all the time you need. He stood, preparing to leave. As a gesture of good faith, I'll suspend all dimensional activity for the next 48 hours while you deliberate. No breaches, no incursions. And if we ultimately decline, the Russian representative asked bluntly. Then we part ways, perhaps to meet again in the future under different circumstances. Inverse Ben's eyes found Ben's. Though I hope it doesn't come to that. There's so much we could accomplish together. With that, he activated his device, creating another perfect portal. I'll await your response, he said, and stepped through, the portal closing silently behind him. The moment he was gone, the tent erupted in conversation, diplomats arguing amongst themselves about the offer and its implications. Ben sat motionless, turning over everything he'd just witnessed. "He's lying," he said finally, loud enough to cut through the chatter. "This whole reasonable act, the gifts, the respect for our decision, it's all part of the plan." "You can't know that," one diplomat objected. "I can," Ben insisted. "Because I know him better than anyone. He's me, just a version that chose power over responsibility. He wouldn't offer all this without a backup plan to take what he wants if we say no." "What evidence do you have of this?" the Secretary General asked. Ben hesitated. "Nothing concrete," he admitted. "Just. I know how I think. And if I were him, I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket." The American representative sighed. "Mr. Tennyson, while we respect your insight, we can't dismiss a potentially beneficial offer based solely on your instincts." "Then at least let us investigate further before you make any decisions," Max interjected smoothly. "The plumbers can analyze these gifts he's sending, verify they're not Trojan horses." The diplomats agreed to this compromise, and the meeting adjourned with the understanding that no final decision would be made until additional intelligence had been gathered. Outside the tent, Ben's team was waiting anxiously. "Well?" Gwen asked. "They're considering his offer," Ben said, frustration evident in his voice. "And I can't even blame them. He played it perfectly, reasonable, respectful, offering solutions to problems they've been struggling with for years." "You don't believe him," Kevin observed. "Not for a second," Ben confirmed. "But he's got them halfway convinced already. And without proof that he's lying." "Then we need to find that proof," Rook concluded. Ben's eyes narrowed with sudden determination. "Exactly. And there's only one place we're going to find it." "Oh no," Gwen recognized his expression. "Ben, you can't be serious." "Deadly serious," Ben replied. "If Inverse Ben won't show us his real plans, then we're going to have to go get them ourselves." "You mean break into his dimension," Kevin translated. "The dimension specifically designed to give him every advantage." "That's the one." Rook frowned. Professor Paradox specifically warned against this course of action. "We don't have a choice," Ben argued. "In less than 48 hours, Earth's leaders might agree to open permanent gateways to his world. We need to know what he's really planning before that happens." "And how exactly do we get there?" Gwen asked. "We can't control the breaches, and Paradox said he can't help." A smile spread across Ben's face. "We can't. But I know someone who can." "Absolutely not." Asmitha's tiny form gestured emphatically from the holographic projector. "Traversing dimensions without proper calibration is reckless enough. Doing so to infiltrate a reality controlled by an alternate version of yourself is suicidal." They had returned to Plummer headquarters to contact the Galvan creator of the Omnitrix, hoping he might provide a solution to their dimensional travel problem. So far, he was being characteristically difficult. "We don't have a choice, Asmith," Ben insisted. "Inverse Ben is planning something bigger than what he's showing us. If Earth accepts his offer, it could be too late to stop whatever he's really up to." "And you believe charging blindly into his territory will somehow improve the situation?" Asmith scoffed. "The Ben Tennyson I know is impulsive, but not foolish." "What if we didn't go in blind?" Gwen suggested. "What if we had a way to track the dimensional anchors back to their source? Find where he's building this engine that Professor Paradox mentioned?" Asmith paused, his enormous eyes narrowing in thought. "The engine, yes," Paradox mentioned his concerns about that particular invention. "A truly disturbing concept." "So you'll help us?" Ben asked hopefully. "I didn't say that," Asmith replied irritably. "But, perhaps there is merit in gathering more information." He paced across the holographic platform. "The Omnitrix contains certain contingencies I built in case of multiversal incidents." Ben looked down at the device on his wrist with new interest. "What kind of contingencies?" Functions that allow it to adapt to different dimensional frequencies, Azimuth explained reluctantly. Originally intended as a safeguard against temporal displacement, but they could be repurposed for intentional dimensional travel. That's perfect. Ben exclaimed. It is extremely dangerous, Azimuth corrected sharply. Especially given that your counterpart possesses a modified omnitrix of his own. The interaction of two such devices in proximity, each attuned to different dimensional frequencies. He shuddered. The consequences could be catastrophic. More catastrophic than letting him merge our dimensions on his terms. Ben challenged. Azimuth fell silent for a moment. No, he finally admitted. I suppose not. So you'll help us? Gwen pressed. I will provide the necessary modifications to the Omnitrix, Azimuth agreed reluctantly. But with conditions. This must be a reconnaissance mission only. A small team, no more than 2 of you. And you must promise to avoid direct confrontation with your counterpart at all costs. Deal, Ben said quickly. Kevin crossed his arms. So who goes? I'll go, Ben said immediately. It has to be me, I know how he thinks, how he operates. And I'm going with you, Gwen stated firmly. My magical abilities can help mask our presence, and I can sense dimensional disturbances. Kevin clearly wanted to object but knew better than to argue with Gwen when her mind was made up. Fine. But you'd better both come back in one piece. Azimuth sighed heavily. Very well. I will transmit the necessary modifications to the Omnitrix. But remember, Ben Tennyson, this is perhaps the most dangerous mission you have ever undertaken. Not because of the physical risks, but because you will be facing a version of yourself that made different choices. Do not underestimate the psychological impact of such an encounter. Ben nodded solemnly. I understand. But as preparations began for their dimensional incursion, Ben wasn't sure he did understand, not fully. Seeing Inverse Ben in diplomatic mode, watching him charm world leaders with reasonable arguments and genuine solutions to pressing problems, it had disturbed him more than facing him in battle. Because for a brief moment, Ben had almost seen the appeal of his counterpart's vision. 12 hours later, Ben and Gwen stood in a specially prepared chamber deep within Plummer headquarters. The room had been reinforced with every dimensional stabilization technology available, its walls lined with sensors to monitor their journey and, hopefully, provide a lifeline back to their reality. The modifications to the Omnitrix are complete, Azimuth announced from the control room. It is now capable of creating a localized dimensional breach tuned to the frequency of your counterpart's reality. Ben studied the device on his wrist, which now displayed a new alien silhouette in its selection ring, a form Azimuth had temporarily added specifically for this mission. Dimensomorph, the Galvan explained, noting Ben's attention. A specialized transformation with enhanced dimensional perception and manipulation abilities. Use it sparingly, the form is unstable and will drain the Omnitrix's power rapidly. Got it, Ben confirmed. Once we're through, we find the engine, gather intel on Inverse Ben's true plans, and get back before anyone notices we were there. Gwen, her hands already glowing with preparatory spells, nodded. In and out. No heroics, no confrontations. Your window will be limited, Azimuth warned. The Omnitrix can sustain the return portal for approximately 6 hours before requiring a full recharge. Do not, under any circumstances, miss that window. Understood, Ben said, then turned to Max, Rook, and Kevin who were watching from the control room. If we're not back in 6 hours, we'll find another way to reach you, Max assured him, though they all knew the promise might be impossible to keep. Kevin pressed his hand against the glass separating them. Be careful. Gwen smiled at him. Always am. Ben activated the Omnitrix, cycling to the new alien form. Here goes nothing. He slammed down on the dial, emerald light engulfing him. The transformation was unlike any he'd experienced before. His body seemed to phase in and out of reality itself, his perception expanding beyond three-dimensional space. When the light faded, Ben had become dimensomorph, a shifting, prismatic being whose edges seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously. Whoa, his voice echoed strangely, as if coming from several directions at once. This is intense. Gwen stared at him, her magical senses overwhelming her. You're existing in at least 4-dimensional planes right now. It's hard to look at you directly. Focus, Ben, Azimuth instructed. Visualize the dimensional frequency of your counterpart's world. The Omnitrix has the signature stored from your previous encounter. Ben concentrated, feeling the Omnitrix guiding his new form's abilities. The air before him began to shimmer, reality folding in on itself as a portal formed, not the violent tear of previous breaches, but a controlled doorway between worlds. That's it, Azimuth confirmed. The portal is stable. Remember, 6 hours. Ready? Ben asked Gwen, his prismatic form rippling with energy. She nodded, reinforcing her protective spells. Let's go. Together, they stepped through the portal into Inverse Ben's world. The transition was smoother than Ben expected, though still disorienting. One moment they were in the sterile chamber of Plumber headquarters, the next standing in what appeared to be an abandoned subway tunnel, dark, damp, and decidedly uninviting. Interesting choice of arrival point, Gwen commented quietly, creating a small mana light to illuminate their surroundings. Ben reverted to human form, conserving the Omnitrix's energy. Azimuth said the Omnitrix would bring us to the most dimensional activity. Wherever the engine is being built, it must be nearby. They moved cautiously through the tunnel, which showed signs of recent use despite its decrepit appearance, fresh footprints in the dust, modern security cameras disguised as broken fixtures, subtle energy signatures that Gwen's magical senses detected embedded in the walls. This place is heavily monitored, she whispered. I'm masking our presence, but we should move quickly. The tunnel eventually opened into a larger chamber that had once been a subway station, now transformed into some kind of covert facility. Sleek technology contrasted with the crumbling infrastructure, and holographic displays flickered with data streams too complex to decipher at a glance. This isn't the main facility, Ben observed, carefully examining the equipment. Looks like some kind of way station or monitoring post. Ben, Gwen called softly from across the chamber. You need to see this. She was standing before a large map displayed on one wall, showing what appeared to be Bellwood, but not their Bellwood. This version of the city was arranged differently, with massive central structures and concentric rings radiating outward. Is that? Ben began. A blueprint, Gwen confirmed grimly. For how he plans to rebuild our Bellwood once the dimensions merge. Ben studied the map with growing unease. The design was efficient, yes, and probably even improved certain aspects of urban planning. But it was also rigid, controlled, with surveillance systems and security checkpoints integrated into every sector. He's not just planning to share technology, Ben muttered. He's planning to completely reshape our world in his image. And our people, Gwen added, pointing to another display showing what appeared to be medical procedures. Look at this, consciousness realignment protocols. He's developing ways to make people accept the new reality without question. Ben's jaw tightened. Mind control. Not exactly, came a voice from behind them. More like, mental adaptation assistance. They spun around to find themselves facing a familiar figure, but not Inverse Ben. It was Kevin Levin, or this reality's version of him. He wore a uniform similar to a plumber's but with Inverse Ben's color scheme, and his expression held none of their Kevin's roguish charm. This Kevin's eyes were cold, calculating. I was wondering when you'd show up, Inverse Kevin said, leaning casually against a console. He said you'd be too curious to stay away. Ben's hand hovered near the Omnitrix. Where is he? Who, Lord Tennyson? Inverse Kevin smirked. Not here. But he'll be very interested to know you've arrived. He tapped a communicator on his wrist. Though I'm betting he already knows. We're not here to fight, Gwen said, her hands nonetheless glowing with mana energy. We just want information. Information? Inverse Kevin laughed. Look around you. The information's everywhere. The boss doesn't hide his plans, he's proud of them. He gestured to the displays. Everything you're seeing. It's all public knowledge in our world. The consciousness protocols, the urban redesigns, it's all part of the Prosperity Initiative. Prosperity through control, Ben countered. Inverse Kevin shrugged. Call it what you want. It works. Crime virtually eliminated. Poverty gone. Disease a thing of the past. His expression hardened. You think I'd work for him if it didn't? I remember what life was like before Lord Tennyson took charge. Chaos. Suffering. Constant alien invasions. And free will? Gwen asked. Where does that fit in? Free will is overrated when people use it to hurt each other, Inverse Kevin replied flatly. But look, I'm not here to debate philosophy. I'm just supposed to escort you to the main facility. He wants to talk to you. So this was a trap, Ben said, unsurprised. Not a trap, Inverse Kevin corrected. An invitation. You came looking for the engine. He's happy to show it to you. He gestured toward a doorway that hadn't been visible moments before. Your choice. Come willingly, or I call in the security teams currently surrounding this position. Ben and Gwen exchanged looks, silently weighing their options. We need to see the engine, Ben said quietly. That's why we came. It could be a trick, Gwen warned. Probably is, Ben agreed. But so far, nothing about Inverse Ben has been what I expected. Maybe we should hear him out, while looking for an opening. After a moment, Gwen nodded. 6 hours, she reminded him. Not a minute more. Don't worry, Inverse Kevin said, overhearing them. You'll have plenty of time for your scheduled departure. The boss is very punctual about these things. They followed him through the doorway, which led to a high-speed transport tube. The journey lasted less than a minute before they emerged into a massive underground facility that dwarfed the monitoring station, a cavernous space filled with technology beyond anything in their world. Hundreds of workers moved purposefully through the complex, a mix of humans and aliens cooperating with practiced efficiency. And at the center of it all stood the engine, a towering structure of crystalline components and energy conduits, pulsing with power that Ben could feel even from a distance. It wasn't complete, but it was far closer to completion than they had feared. Impressive, isn't it? Came a familiar voice. Inverse Ben stepped from behind a control station, dressed not in his diplomatic attire from earlier but in a more casual version of his usual outfit. He looked exactly like Ben, same face, same build, same confident stance, but for the color scheme and the subtle hardness in his eyes. I'd call it concerning, Ben replied, carefully keeping distance between them. Especially the part about rewriting people's minds to accept your version of reality. Inverse Ben smiled slightly. I see you've been exploring. Good. I wanted you to see the truth of what I'm offering. Mind control isn't an offer, it's a violation, Gwen stated firmly. It's adaptation, Inverse Ben countered. The human mind isn't designed to process multidimensional awareness. Without the consciousness protocols, the merge would drive most people insane. He gestured toward the engine. This isn't conquest, Ben. It's salvation. From what? Ben demanded. Entropy. Stagnation. The inevitable collapse that awaits any single-dimension civilization. Inverse Ben's expression grew more intense. I've seen it, Ben. My azimuth showed me before he died, the ultimate fate of universes that remain isolated. They decay from within, unable to incorporate new dimensional energies. So you're what, saving reality by force merging dimensions? Ben scoffed. I'm creating a controlled merge rather than allowing a catastrophic one later. Inverse Ben stepped closer. Your paradox must have told you something similar. Why do you think he's so concerned about the engine? Not because it's dangerous, but because it works. The certainty in his voice was unsettling, especially since Ben couldn't immediately dismiss the claim. Paradox had been worried, yes, but also strangely ambiguous about the long-term implications of dimensional isolation. Even if that were true, Gwen interjected, forcing this on people without their understanding or consent is wrong. Which is why I'm seeking consent, Inverse Ben replied smoothly. The diplomatic approach is genuine. I would prefer willing partnership. His expression hardened slightly. But the stakes are too high to accept refusal. And there it is, Ben said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. The truth behind the reasonable facade. You'll take what you want regardless of our choice. I'll do what needs to be done to save both our realities, Inverse Ben corrected. Just as you would, if you had seen what I've seen. He turned, gesturing for them to follow. Come. Let me show you the heart of the engine. Then you can judge my intentions for yourself. Against their better judgment, they followed him deeper into the facility, past security checkpoints that deactivated automatically in his presence. Eventually, they reached a sealed chamber at the very center of the complex. This, Inverse Ben said as the doors slid open, is what makes the multiversal merge possible. Inside was a swirling vortex of energy contained within crystalline restraints, but not ordinary energy. It seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, colors shifting in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow directly. Nucleus energy, Inverse Ben explained. The fundamental force that exists between dimensions. My scientists discovered it by accident 5 years ago while researching interdimensional communications. Gwen stepped closer, her magical senses overwhelming her. It's alive, somehow. Conscious. Very perceptive, Inverse Ben nodded approvingly. It does possess a form of awareness, though not intelligence as we understand it. More like cosmic instinct. And you're using it to power your engine, Ben observed, feeling the Omnitrix react subtly to the energy's presence. Not just power it, it is the engine, Inverse Ben corrected. The technology you see is merely a framework to direct and shape its natural properties. The nucleus wants realities to connect, it's the artificial barriers between dimensions that are unnatural. Despite himself, Ben was fascinated. If what Inverse Ben was saying was true, if dimensions were naturally meant to interact, then the implications were enormous. Why do you really want me to see this? Ben asked suddenly, suspicion returning. You could have just captured us, or sent us back. Why the guided tour? Inverse Ben studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. Because I need you to understand. Not just intellectually, but truly comprehend what's at stake. He stepped closer to the swirling nucleus. When the diplomatic meeting resumes in 36 hours, your world leaders will likely request your input before making their final decision. And you think showing me this will convince me to support you? Ben asked incredulously. I think showing you the truth gives you the chance to make an informed choice, Inverse Ben replied. Something I respect, despite what you might believe about me. A thought struck Ben suddenly. You knew we were coming. This whole setup, the monitoring station we'd discovered, the conveniently timed arrival of your Kevin, even this conversation, it's all planned. Inverse Ben's smile widened slightly. Of course it was. I know how you think, Ben. I knew the diplomatic approach would make you suspicious. I knew you'd find a way to investigate. So I prepared accordingly. Why? Gwen demanded. What do you really want from us? Understanding, Inverse Ben said simply. And perhaps, eventually, cooperation. He turned back to the nucleus. This process will happen whether you support it or not. But with your help, the transition could be smoother, less disruptive. Fewer people would resist if Ben 10, hero of Earth, endorsed the merge. Never going to happen, Ben stated firmly. That's what I thought at first, Inverse Ben said, turning back to face him. But you're still here, listening, observing. You haven't attacked, haven't tried to destroy the engine. Some part of you wants to understand, to consider the possibility that I might be right. The worst part was, Ben couldn't entirely deny it. The science seemed sound, the reasoning logical, if one accepted the premise that dimensional isolation was ultimately destructive. And inverse Ben's demeanor remained reasonable, thoughtful, never slipping into the megalomaniacal villain role Ben had expected. You still haven't told us what caused you to take this path, Ben said. Changing tactics. What happened after your grandpa Max died that turned you into this? Something flickered in inverse Ben's eyes, a brief shadow of old pain. Not one event. A series of realizations. He walked to a control panel, activating a holographic display. After the hybrid invasion, without Grandpa's guidance, I made mistakes. People died because I was reactive rather than proactive. The display showed images of battles Ben recognized, McGregor, the Forever Knights, Diagon, but with different outcomes, darker and more destructive than in his reality. Gwen was critically injured during the Diagon crisis, inverse Ben continued, his voice tightening slightly. She survived, but her powers were permanently damaged. Kevin. He glanced toward where inverse Kevin waited by the door. Kevin had to make difficult choices to save her. What choices? Gwen asked quietly. I absorbed the power of an osmosion artifact, inverse Kevin answered from across the room. It gave me the ability to heal her, but changed me permanently. He held up a hand, which briefly shifted into pure energy before resolidifying. I'm not fully human anymore. But it was worth it. Inverse Ben nodded. That was the turning point. I realized that playing by the old rules, reactive heroism, limited intervention, was costing too much. So I started changing the rules. By taking control, Ben concluded. By taking responsibility, inverse Ben corrected. Something Grandpa taught us both, though we interpreted it differently. He deactivated the display. Within a year, I had restructured the plumbers into a more effective force. Within 3, Earth's governments had voluntarily unified under my leadership after I prevented a global catastrophe they couldn't handle. Everything that followed was a natural progression. There's nothing natural about mind control and force-dimensional merging, Gwen argued. Perhaps not from your perspective, inverse Ben acknowledged. But from where I stand, having seen the alternatives, it's the only logical path forward. A subtle alert sounded from his wrist device. Inverse Ben checked it and nodded. I've shown you what you came to see. You have approximately 4 hours before your return window closes. You're free to explore the facility, ask questions, gather whatever information you need to make an informed decision. Just like that? Ben asked suspiciously. You're letting us wander around your top-secret base. Why not? There's nothing here I'm ashamed of, inverse Ben replied. And besides, he smiled slightly, where would you go? This is my reality, Ben. Every system, every sensor, every citizen is part of my network. You couldn't escape if you wanted to. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving them with inverse Kevin as their reluctant guide. Well, Gwen said once inverse Ben was out of earshot, that was not what I expected, Ben finished, still processing everything they'd seen and heard. He actually believes he's doing the right thing. Most tyrants do, Gwen pointed out. It doesn't make them any less dangerous. Ben nodded, but couldn't shake a nagging doubt. The nucleus energy, the scientific explanations, the apparent sincerity in inverse Ben's concern for dimensional stability, it was compelling in a way that simple megalomania wouldn't have been. We should gather as much data as we can, he said finally. Even if it's just what he wants us to see, it's better than nothing. For the next 3 hours, they explored the facility under inverse Kevin's watchful eye, documenting the engine's components, the consciousness protocols, which were indeed designed to prevent mental collapse during dimensional shifts, though they also ensured compliance with the new order, and the extensive plans for restructuring their Earth after the merge. What they found was troubling not because it was evil, but because it was so rational. Inverse Ben's plans were meticulous, well-reasoned, and in many ways beneficial, if one accepted the premise that freedom could be sacrificed for security and progress. "Time to wrap it up," Inverse Kevin announced eventually. "Your return window opens in 45 minutes. The boss wants you back at the entry point by then." Thoughtful of him, Ben muttered, though he was privately relieved. The longer they stayed, the more he felt the subtle wrongness of this reality, a sense of being watched, evaluated, processed by systems beyond his perception. As they made their way back to the subway station where they'd arrived, Inverse Kevin maintained a professional distance, though Ben caught him occasionally glancing at Gwen with an expression that suggested complicated emotions beneath his controlled exterior. "She's okay," Gwen said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Your version of me. In case you were wondering." Inverse Kevin's stride faltered slightly. "I know. The boss keeps tabs on all the alternate realities he's identified. She's a professor at some university now. Limited magic use, but otherwise healthy." "You don't see her anymore?" Gwen asked carefully. A muscle twitched in Inverse Kevin's jaw. "Not for years. After what happened, after what I became to save her, she couldn't look at me the same way." His voice hardened. "But it was worth it. The work we're doing here, it's worth everything we've sacrificed." They reached the subway station to find Inverse Ben waiting, now dressed in the exosuit he'd worn during their first-dimensional encounter. The contrast with his earlier casual demeanor was jarring. "Right on schedule," he observed. "I trust your investigation was informative." "That's one word for it," Ben replied cautiously. Inverse Ben studied him intently. "You're still conflicted. Good. That means you're actually considering the possibilities instead of dismissing them outright." "I'm considering that you might genuinely believe you're doing the right thing," Ben corrected. "It doesn't mean I agree with your methods." "Fair enough." Inverse Ben activated a device on his wrist, and the air before them began to shimmer, a dimensional portal forming, but not of their creation. "This will take you back to precisely when and where you're expected." A gesture of good faith. Ben exchanged a suspicious look with Gwen. "Why would you help us return?" "Because I want you to report what you've seen honestly," Inverse Ben replied. "Tell your world leaders about the engine, the nucleus energy, the science behind the merge. Let them make an informed decision. And if that decision is still no." Inverse Ben's expression remained neutral. "Then we proceed as planned. But I'd prefer cooperation to resistance." "There will be resistance," Ben promised. "Count on it." "I am," Inverse Ben said, and for the first time, a hint of genuine regret colored his voice. "It's factored into all my calculations. But I'm hoping you, at least, might see the bigger picture before it's too late." Before Ben could respond, a violent tremor shook the facility, causing dust and debris to rain down from the ceiling. Alarm systems activated, bathing everything in pulsing red light. "What the hell?" Inverse Kevin exclaimed, checking his communicator. Inverse Ben's expression darkened instantly. "The nucleus chamber. Security breach in progress." He turned to Ben, accusation in his eyes. "What did you do?" "Nothing." Ben protested genuinely. "We've been with your Kevin the whole time." Another tremor, stronger than the first, staggered them. The dimensional portal flickered but held stable. "Sir," a voice called over Inverse Ben's communicator. "The nucleus is destabilizing. Energy readings are off the charts." Inverse Ben's gaze never left Ben's face. "You brought someone else," he said, understanding dawning. This was a distraction. Ben shook his head in genuine confusion. "We came alone. Whatever's happening, it's not our doing." For a moment, Inverse Ben seemed ready to attack, his hand hovering over his Omnitrix. Then his communicator buzzed again with urgent updates, and his expression shifted to one of cold calculation. "Go," he ordered abruptly. Back to your dimension. Now. What? Ben asked, startled by the sudden shift. The situation is critical. I don't have time to deal with you. Inverse Ben was already moving toward an emergency transport tube, Inverse Kevin at his heels. The portal will remain stable for approximately 3 minutes. I suggest you use it. Wait. Ben called after him. What's happening? Inverse Ben paused momentarily. Something unexpected. Perhaps your Professor Paradox found a way to interfere after all. His eyes narrowed. This changes nothing in the long term. The diplomatic meeting proceeds as scheduled. Choose your side wisely, Ben Tennyson. With that, he was gone, leaving Ben and Gwen alone with the flickering portal and the continuing tremors that seemed to be growing stronger by the second. We should go, Gwen said urgently, pulling Ben toward the portal. Whatever's happening, we don't want to be caught in the middle of it. Ben hesitated, torn between escape and the urge to investigate. But if someone's attacking the engine, maybe they're on our side. Maybe they need help. Or maybe it's something worse than either Inverse Ben or us, Gwen countered. Something that could trap us here permanently if that portal closes. Another violent shake decided the matter as part of the ceiling collapsed nearby. Ben nodded reluctantly. You're right. Let's go. They stepped through the portal together, the familiar disorientation of dimensional travel washing over them. When their vision cleared, they found themselves back in the chamber at Plumber headquarters, exactly as promised, with Max, Rook, Kevin, and Azimuth waiting anxiously for their return. Ben. Gwen. Max rushed forward, relief evident on his face. You're back early. Did something go wrong? You could say that, Ben replied, still trying to process everything they'd witnessed. Something was attacking the engine when we left. Some kind of security breach that Inverse Ben definitely wasn't expecting. Interesting, Azimuth mused from his position on a console. Perhaps other factions in his reality are not as supportive of his plans as he would have us believe. That's not all, Gwen added, creating a mana projection that displayed images she'd recorded with her magical senses. The engine, the nucleus energy, the consciousness protocols, it's all far more advanced than we feared. For the next hour, they debriefed the team on everything they'd discovered, the scientific basis for Inverse Ben's claims, the apparent sincerity of his belief in the necessity of dimensional merging, and the troubling rationality behind his methods. So he's not just a power-hungry dictator, Kevin summarized, frowning. He actually thinks he's saving reality. Which makes him more dangerous, not less, Rook observed. One who believes in the righteousness of their cause will not be easily dissuaded. Especially when his cause has some scientific merit, Azimuth added reluctantly, studying the data they'd brought back. The concept of nucleus energy is not entirely unknown in theoretical physics. If he has indeed found a way to harness it. You're not saying he's right? Ben asked, alarmed. Azimuth's expression grew stern. No. His methods are fundamentally flawed. Forcing dimensional convergence through artificial means would create instabilities that could ripple throughout the multiverse. And the consciousness manipulation is morally indefensible. But the basic premise, that dimensions are naturally meant to interact in some way, might have validity, Max concluded, studying the holographic displays. Great, Ben muttered. So we're fighting someone who's partially right for the wrong reasons. The most dangerous kind of opponent, Azimuth noted. Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the base. The main screen shifted to show massive energy readings emanating from downtown Bellwood, the same location where Inverse Ben had made his public address. What now? Ben groaned, already moving toward the exit. Energy signature matches dimensional breach patterns, a technician reported. But it's different somehow. More stable. He's back, Ben realized. But why? The diplomatic meeting isn't scheduled for another day at least. They rushed to deploy, Ben transforming into XLR-8 to reach the scene first. What he found in downtown Bellwood wasn't a breach or an invasion force, but a single, stable portal hovering 20 feet above the main plaza. And standing before it was Inverse Ben, looking far less composed than when they'd left him less than 2 hours ago. His exosuit showed damage, one arm apparently malfunctioning, and his expression was tight with controlled anger. Beside him stood Inverse Kevin and a small security detail, all similarly battle-worn. Ben skidded to a halt, reverting to human form as Gwen, Kevin, Rook, and a plumber team arrived behind him. What happened to waiting 48 hours? Ben called out, maintaining distance between them. Inverse Ben's eyes found his, cold calculation replacing the reasonable diplomat from earlier. Circumstances have changed. The offer remains open, but the timetable has accelerated. Because someone attacked your engine, Ben guessed. A flicker of surprise crossed Inverse Ben's face before his expression hardened again. My reality is experiencing certain, internal conflicts that require my attention. The diplomatic meeting will proceed immediately. I've already notified Earth's leaders. What kind of conflicts? Gwen asked, her hands subtly glowing with prepared magic. Nothing that concerns you, Inverse Ben replied dismissively. All that matters is that the merge proceeds as scheduled. My technicians have activated the dimensional anchors worldwide, they're now in standby mode awaiting final authorization. You can't just force this timeline. Ben protested. The world leaders haven't even had time to consider your proposal. They've had enough time, Inverse Ben stated flatly. The risks of delay have become unacceptable. He checked a device on his wrist. The Secretary General and key representatives will arrive within 20 minutes. I suggest you use that time to reconsider your position, Ben Tennyson. The cold authority in his voice was a stark contrast to the reasonable tone he'd used during their earlier encounters. Whatever had happened in his reality had clearly altered his approach, made him more desperate, more willing to force the issue. What went wrong? Ben pressed, sensing an opportunity in his counterpart's uncharacteristic urgency. What attacked the engine? Who's opposing you in your own world? Inverse Ben's expression darkened further. Misguided resistance. Nothing more. He turned to his security detail. Establish a perimeter. No one approaches until the diplomats arrive. As his forces moved to comply, Ben noticed something he hadn't before, a subtle instability in the portal behind Inverse Ben, tiny flickers of energy that suggested it wasn't as perfectly controlled as previous breaches had been. Gwen, he whispered. The portal. Something's not right. She nodded almost imperceptibly, her magical senses already probing the dimensional gateway. It's fluctuating. Whatever happened in his reality affected his technology. This was potentially valuable information, a weakness they might exploit. But before Ben could formulate a plan, the air above them shimmered with a familiar energy signature. Another portal was forming, directly above Inverse Ben's. Sir, one of the security team called out in alarm. Unauthorized breach detected. Inverse Ben spun around, his damaged exosuit whirring with the effort. Impossible. The pathway is secured. But the new portal continued to form, expanding rapidly until it stabilized, a swirling vortex of energy that looked similar to Inverse Ben's gateway but with subtle differences in its energy pattern. And from this new portal emerged a figure that caused everyone present to freeze in shock. It was Ben Tennyson, but neither the Ben of this world nor Inverse Ben. This new arrival wore a tattered white and blue uniform, his omnitrix glowing with an unusual cyan light. His face was harder, more weathered than either Ben's, with a scar running across his left cheek. He landed gracefully between the two groups, casting a calculating glance at both Bens before addressing the gathered forces. Well, he said with a grim smile, looks like I arrived just in time for the family reunion. Inverse Ben's expression shifted from shock to cold fury. You. How did you find this reality? You're not the only one who can track Omnitrix signatures across dimensions, the newcomer replied coolly. Though I have to say, you made it especially easy with all these fancy anchors you've been planting. Ben stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? The scarred Ben turned to him, assessing him with a glance that felt uncomfortably penetrating. You can call me Prime Ben. I'm from what you might consider the original timeline, the one this megalomaniac is trying to erase with his dimensional merger. Original timeline? Ben repeated, confusion evident in his voice. What are you talking about? He's lying, Inverse Ben cut in sharply. There is no original timeline. This is an imposter using dimensional technology to mimic an Omnitrix signature. Prime Ben laughed, the sound harsh and without humor. Still can't admit the truth, can you? That you're the aberration, the broken branch that should never have existed. The tension in the plaza thickened as the three versions of Ben Tennyson faced one another, each representing a different path, a different interpretation of the same starting point. I don't have time for this, Inverse Ben growled, activating his Omnitrix. Security team, contain this intruder. Prime Ben's smile widened. I was hoping you'd try that. His own Omnitrix glowed as he slammed down on the dial, transforming in a flash of cyan light. What emerged wasn't any alien form Ben recognized, it was something new, a shifting amalgamation of multiple aliens, as if the transformation couldn't decide which form to take. Parts of Heat Blast, XLR-8, Diamond Head, and others blended together in a constantly changing configuration. Like it? Prime Ben's voice echoed strangely through the hybrid form. I call it Omni-Merge. Fitting, given the circumstances. The security team opened fire, energy weapons discharging in coordinated volleys. Prime Ben moved with impossible speed, the XLR-8 aspects of his hybrid form propelling him between attackers while diamond head crystal structures emerged from his body to deflect incoming fire. Ben! Gwen called out. What do we do? It was a good question. Ben had no idea which of these alternate versions, if either, was telling the truth. Prime Ben's claims of an original timeline sounded far-fetched, but Inverse Ben's increasing desperation suggested he was hiding something significant. We protect our reality, Ben decided, activating his own Omnitrix. From both of them if necessary. He transformed into swampfire, plant matter replacing human flesh as methane pods developed along his arms. Rook, Kevin, Gwen, focus on containing the security team. I'll deal with the other Bens. The plaza erupted into chaos as three versions of the wielder of the most powerful device in the universe clashed. Inverse Ben transformed into Heat Blast, his flames burning darker and hotter than Ben's version. Prime Ben's hybrid form continued shifting, adapting to each attack with terrifying efficiency. You're making a mistake. Prime Ben called out to Ben as they momentarily faced off. He's lying about everything. The dimensional merge won't save realities, it will consume them, rebuild them in his image. And what's your agenda? Ben countered, hurling a barrage of seed pods that exploded into entangling vines. Just happened to show up at the perfect moment. I've been tracking him across dimensions for years, Prime Ben replied, the wildvine aspects of his hybrid form easily countering Ben's plant-based attack. He's already destroyed 3 timelines with his mergers. Yours is next unless we stop him. Inverse Ben launched a massive fireball that forced them both to dodge. Don't listen to him. He's the destructor, a dimensional anomaly that feeds on timeline collapse. The battle intensified, reality itself seeming to warp around the 3 Omnitrix wielders as their powers clashed. Buildings sustained damage as stray energy blasts impacted walls, streets cracked under the force of their movements, and the 2 portals above began to pulse erratically, responding to the proximity of 3 Omnitrixes tuned to different dimensional frequencies. Through it all, Ben tried to make sense of the conflicting claims. Prime Ben fought with a precision that suggested extensive experience against Inverse Ben specifically. Inverse Ben attacked with increasing desperation, his strategies focused more on escape than victory. Neither seemed to be lying outright, but both were clearly withholding crucial information. The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for a sudden, violent pulse from both portals. The dimensional gateways flared with blinding energy, then began to merge, their boundaries blurring together in a way that sent shockwaves across the plaza. "No!" Inverse Ben shouted, genuine alarm in his voice. "The frequencies are destabilizing." "What's happening?" Ben demanded, reverting to human form as the Omnitrix timed out from the dimensional interference. Prime Ben also reverted. His scarred face grim. Dimensional collapse. 3 active Omnitrixes too close together, 2 unstable portals in proximity, it's creating a cascade effect. Above them, the merged portal expanded rapidly, its edges becoming jagged and unstable. Through it, Ben caught glimpses of another reality, one where Bellwood lay in ruins, massive technological structures rising from the devastation like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. "That's his world," Prime Ben said, noticing Ben's gaze. "Or what's left of it after his improvements." Inverse Ben, also forced back to human form by the dimensional interference, staggered forward. "This isn't over," he snarled, though his attention was clearly divided between them and the deteriorating portal. "The merge will happen, one way or another." With that, he activated his exosuit's emergency protocols. Mechanical wings deployed from its back, propelling him upward toward the unstable portal. His security team followed suit, abandoning the battle to escape through the dimensional gateway. "We can't let him go." Prime Ben shouted, reaching for his Omnitrix only to find it temporarily inactive. "If he returns to his reality and stabilizes the engine, he'll simply try again, maybe somewhere your team isn't ready to respond." Ben hesitated, torn between the immediate threat to his reality and the uncertainty of pursuing Inverse Ben through an increasingly unstable dimensional portal. "Ben!" Gwen called out, rushing to his side with Kevin and Rook. "The portal is destabilizing rapidly. If it collapses completely, it could take half the city with it," Prime Ben finished grimly. "I've seen it happen before." "That settled it. How do we close it safely?" Ben demanded. Prime Ben's expression was grim. "We need to counterbalance the dimensional frequencies, create a controlled collapse rather than a catastrophic one." "And how exactly do we do that?" Kevin asked skeptically. "With all 3 Omnitrixes," Prime Ben replied. "But with his gone." He nodded toward where Inverse Ben had disappeared through the portal. "Wait," Ben interrupted. "Azimuth added a new transformation to my Omnitrix, Dimensomorph. Could that help?" Prime Ben's eyes widened slightly. "Dimensomorph? He gave you that form?" "That might actually work." The portal pulsed again, more violently this time, sending cracked spiderwebbing across nearby buildings. Debris began to float upward, drawn toward the dimensional tear as gravity itself wavered in its vicinity. "We need to act now," Rook urged. "The structural integrity of this entire area is compromised." Ben nodded, turning to Prime Ben. "What do we do?" "Transform into Dimensomorph. I'll use what power my Omnitrix has left to stabilize your form. Together, we should be able to initiate a controlled collapse of the portal." It wasn't much of a plan, but with the situation deteriorating by the second, Ben had little choice. He activated the Omnitrix, cycling to the prismatic alien form Azimuth had added. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, and slammed down on the dial. The transformation was even more disorienting than before, his perception expanding beyond normal dimensions as his body shifted into the crystalline, multifaceted form of Dimensomorph. Around him, he could see reality itself as layers of probability and energy, the unstable portal a gaping wound in the fabric of spacetime. Prime Ben placed his hand on Ben's shoulder, his Omnitrix glowing with cyan light that seemed to flow into Ben's transformed body, stabilizing the shifting aspects of his dimensional form. "Focus on the portal," Prime Ben instructed, his voice echoing strangely in Ben's expanded perception. "Visualize it closing like a wound healing, layers drawing together, energies rebalancing." Ben concentrated, feeling the Omnitrix guiding his abilities. The portal responded to his influence, its chaotic energies beginning to realign under his direction. But something was wrong, there was resistance, as if something on the other side was fighting to keep the gateway open. He's countering from his side. Ben called out, the words distorting as they passed through his multidimensional form. I can feel him using the engine to stabilize the breach. Push harder. Prime Ben urged. You have to overcome his influence. Ben strained against the opposing force, pouring more energy into the closure attempt. The portal contracted slightly, its edges growing more defined as the chaotic energy patterns began to normalize. It's working. Gwen called out, her magical senses confirming what they could all see. But the victory was short-lived. Just as the portal seemed on the verge of closing completely, a massive surge of energy pulsed from the other side, inverse Ben making one final, desperate attempt to maintain the connection between dimensions. The feedback hit Ben like a physical blow, sending him staggering backward. The dimensomorph form flickered, nearly collapsing under the strain. I can't hold it, he gasped, feeling the transformation beginning to fail. Prime Ben's expression hardened with determination. Then we changed tactics. He released Ben's shoulder, stepping forward to face the destabilizing portal directly. Keep focusing on closure. I'll handle the feedback. Before Ben could protest, Prime Ben activated his Omnitrix again. This time, instead of transforming, he directed the device's energy directly at the portal in a continuous beam of cyan light. The effect was immediate, the feedback energy from inverse Ben's reality redirected toward Prime Ben instead of Ben. What are you doing? Ben called out, seeing the strain on Prime Ben's face as he absorbed the dimensional backlash. What needs to be done, Prime Ben replied through gritted teeth. Close it. Now. Ben redoubled his efforts, using Prime Ben's sacrifice as an opportunity to force the portal closed. This time, without the direct interference from inverse Ben's technology, the dimensional tier began to seal properly, reality knitting itself back together under Ben's guidance. With a final, soundless implosion, the portal collapsed completely. The air where it had been shimmered briefly, then returned to normal, save for a faint ozone smell and lingering energy discharge that made the hair on everyone's arms stand on end. Ben reverted to human form, the Omnitrix depleted from the massive energy expenditure. He staggered, nearly falling before Gwen caught his arm to steady him. You did it, she said softly. It's closed. We did it, Ben corrected, turning to where Prime Ben stood. But the scarred version of himself didn't look victorious. Instead, his form was flickering like a bad hologram, portions of his body seeming to phase in and out of reality. The cyan light of his Omnitrix pulsed erratically, struggling to maintain its connection to his increasingly unstable form. What's happening to you? Ben asked, alarmed. Prime Ben smiled grimly. Dimensional displacement. When the portal closed, I lost my anchor to this reality. He held up his flickering arm. I don't belong here, Ben. Without an active dimensional gateway, I can't maintain a stable presence. There has to be something we can do, Ben insisted, looking to Gwen for support. Your magic, or, Prime Ben shook his head. There isn't time. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that you stopped him, for now. For now. Kevin repeated. You mean he'll be back? Count on it, Prime Ben confirmed, his voice beginning to echo strangely as his displacement worsened. The engine was damaged but not destroyed. Once he repairs it, something went wrong with this response, please try again. Write Chapter 2. Bro, the end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.